Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, one of the fastest growing real estate investing podcasts in the world. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors? Find out what got them to where they are now. Get insight into their daily habits and take these insights to inspire your own growth. Each episode, Jonathan Greene shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor and the founder of Streamline, a data-driven, investor-friendly, independent real estate brokerage located in Madison, New Jersey. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, this is the free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for showing up for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. My guest today is Ryan Barone. He's the CEO and former CTO of RentRedi. RentRedi is built for investors who take action. Whether you're scaling your portfolio or systematizing your first rental, RentRedi gives you the tools to run a smarter, more profitable business. Let's get to it. This is episode 360 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Ryan Barone. Ryan is the CEO and founder of RentRedi. RentRedi gives smart landlords modern, easy-to-use software to manage rentals without the stress. But I also want you to know that Ryan is the former CTO also, and we're going to get into this. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jonathan. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we were just laughing off before we started, but do you think that there's anyone who's talked to more landlords and tenants than you have over the past 9 years and 7 months?
I don't think so, and I'm hoping to keep that record. So I'll hold it as long as I can, but yeah, I'm trying to keep it up.
Well, explain to the listeners why, because I know a lot about startups. I love how you started the company and what you did. And when I look at other startups and how they did it, especially like I'm going to compare you to the guys at DoorDash, they did the same thing. Like they were really running it to see how it worked. This is how you got started, right? And why you've talked to so many.
Yeah. So the reason that I've talked to so many is because we were far from an overnight success. And, when you get started creating your own company, you sometimes have to do every job yourself. And one of those jobs for me was being our only support agent along with my co-founder, who's my dad. I asked him to do the business with me. Had spent all my life in sales and marketing. And I was, as you mentioned, on the CTO side, actually writing all of the software for our company pre-AI. I'll add in terms of no real assistance.
In the hard times.
Right. The harder times of writing software. And really, I was building it for myself because I had gone through a really hard experience trying to get an apartment. And so I spent the first 3 years of RentRedi once we started, full time, and I have to go into a little more of the backstory there. But to answer your question around the support side, we actually did the support. So if you were messaging in, calling in, phone calls, demos, you were getting directly to my cell phone and my co-founder's cell phone. And I still take pride in calling our landlords and jumping into chats every now and then. I don't always tell people it's me, but every now and then it's me. Because I like to stay close to people. Everything that exists on the platform today was not built because we were trying to build a business or sell a product or, create anything other than solving a problem for people. And I take a lot of pride in the joy that is like, to me, the list of features on our site is not like a feature list that we said, we have to go build these things, but is truly pain points, stories that I can take you back to of any individual person on the platform that said, hey, I'm living through this problem right now. And Ryan, if you could solve this for me, it would make my life better. And sometimes that was give me a night and I'll talk to you tomorrow. And sometimes it was give me a week or two. But ultimately it all came down to, trying to build things that actually genuinely helped independent landlords and their tenants just be able to manage their units more successfully or happier or more easily.
Yeah, what drove you to create the software? I know you said you were trying to get it. Was it really that just one bad experience of trying to get it and realizing, well, I have technical skills and there's a hole here for people?
Yeah, so I was going to school in New York City. I was double majoring in economics and math, and I was minoring in computer science. So I really enjoyed that
So you
computer
were
science
free all
side.
the time, no
I
homework.
was I
Yeah,
was super
yeah,
free all the
yeah.
time, had a lot of free time. Um, I grew up upstate around Albany, and I'd gone from like last summer, I was bussing the track up there. If you ever been up to Saratoga
Yeah,
racetrack, and
yeah, yeah,
I'd gotten this first internship at Goldman Sachs, and I was all excited that I was like, wow, I get to like work in New York City and go to this Wall Street job, and it's walking distance to Pace University where I went to
yeah.
college. And that was my chance to move out of dorms and get my first apartment. And I was super, super excited. I had a couple of roommates who all had guarantors, and we showed up for this apartment that would have been walking distance to both school and work. And they said, we need your letter of employment, bank statements, tax returns, student transcript, all that for your guarantors and your roommates. And I'm like, I don't even know how to pull a pay stub. I don't know how to do
Right.
any of this stuff. We
Yeah.
ended up not getting that apartment or the next few. I lived about 45 minutes from both school and work the next year instead. We lived up on 101st in Lexington instead of like walking distance in the financial district of both.
Yeah.
And initially, like I said, it was not RentRedi wasn't supposed to be a business. It was really me coming away from that feeling like, oh, I'm just bad at renting. And when I talked to people that I was at my internship that had been working there and living in New York City for
Yeah.
a decade plus, they're like, renting's actually just that hard. It's
Yeah,
you
right, right.
probably are bad
It's
at it,
not
but
you.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not just you. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun to just make something for myself and friends, and it'll make it easier for us to get all of our documents together and apply to units more easily. And I'm sure that the landlord side is perfect and they're happy with everything on their
Oh,
side. And
yeah.
it's just the tenant side, right?
Right.
That's the problem. So like version 1 of RentRedi was intentionally didn't change anything for the landlord. There was no platform for the landlord. It was just the tenant side. And
Create like a package of delivery easier, right?
right. You
Yeah.
could like scan photos and use like OCR to crop
Very
that
important. Yeah.
and pull out information and pull together your application. But you all send it through like this PDF that I would generate off your phone and send to the landlord over
Yeah.
email, thinking that's the way they've asked me to send it already. I'm sure that's the way they wanted. And it was only once I started trying to use it and give it to some landlords, they were like, hey, why didn't you change our side? Why did you leave our side the same? And I was like, I assumed
Yeah.
you were happy. Like, no, we're not happy. It's either we have to be this massive property management company and then we can get access to this, enterprise software,
Right, right.
or we have to use this pen and paper and spreadsheets or hire a property manager. And so I just happened to be interacting with these like independent individuals that were self-managing on spreadsheets and desperate systems. And I was seeing the trickle down effect of that as a tenant.
Yeah.
And so it really happened very naturally in terms of, one person saying, hey, the application's great, but to be honest, I couldn't care less. Like all I really want to do is like I handle the maintenance myself. And if I get a call in the middle of the night and it's flooding my kitchen floor, I'll get out of bed. But they write really nondescript messages about a leaking sink and water
Yeah.
isn't water. So can you show me a video of the maintenance? It's like, sure, we can do video maintenance. And then, from there, some person saying, oh, applications are great. But, I had this couple that I loved after I went to screen them. They were crying in front of me. And if I could pre-qualify them up front, they wouldn't waste the time. I wouldn't waste the time. They wouldn't spend money. And it went on and on. These were probably like some of the very first things we expanded into in terms of
Yeah.
like maintenance and rent payments and screening and things. But it really happened naturally across the platform over years and years to build up basically everything that exists in RentRedi today.
Yeah, I think it's a great strategy. I mean, when I first started doing, just as a side example, that's very similar, short-term rentals 20 years ago, my sister and I, when we first did it, we were iterating based on the feedback. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, we left out these things. People want a colander. We're like, oh, of course
Mhm.
they like to make pasta. But like you don't know in the beginning, it's much harder now because people's expectations are so much higher.
Yes.
So even for you, 9 years ago, it must have been really good to get that done because right now people expect all the bells and whistles. And if you don't
Right.
do it, they're like coming for you right away with the 3 stars.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true, and I think that's been one of the areas that I think through all the history of RentRedi and different versions, and I think there's kind of like the early years where it was building out kind of like that core functionality around like listing syndication and rent payments and screenings and accounting and maintenance and communication and things, and then there became like kind of this COVID period when COVID
Yeah.
hit, where like certain things people didn't care about before and never asked for, all of a sudden they cared a lot about, like digital lease signing and being able to report your rent to the credit bureaus, because all of a sudden you had these eviction moratoriums and you were trying to figure out how do I encourage
Yeah.
my tenant to pay rent on time. And so we, built some of those things. I mean, truly like the summer of COVID, we're like, okay, we can report rent. Tenant gets to build their credit. They actually love paying through this platform now because
Yeah.
they're improving their credit score and making
That's
the rest
very
of their life
important.
easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been huge over the years. And then I think to your point now, it's like, what's the next phase of that? And what's been really exciting is that, at this point, we have such a mass of data that we can pull information out of it that actually we can feed back to people so that kind of akin to like starting your first Airbnb and
Yeah.
wishing you had like the defaults of what you should have in there.
For the
Um,
area too. Yeah.
Exactly. For the area, we're doing more and more of that for the landlords coming onto our platform. We're trying to say, okay, we have landlords actively managing across all 50 states, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, $35 billion in assets under management. There has to be information in here that's helpful for someone trying to figure out, how do I scale from 1 to 5 or 5 to 15, or even just manage that first one and not make, the mistakes that cost me money. And so it's been really exciting to be able to look at some of our own data points and then pull out of that things that we can suggest back to people on the platform how to not only just manage more easily, which was really my initial goal. Like our
Yeah.
tagline was make renting easy, because that was just like all I really wanted to do, is just like make everybody's life easier, but actually make it like more successful for like the landlord that's trying to like grow their portfolio, and for the tenant that's trying to love where they live. And it's been really fun to be able to get into kind of this new age where we can kind of synthesize that data and give it back in defaults that help either someone that's kind of like a newbie investor or a scaling investor be more successful at it.
Yeah, I think it's really important because if there's not a bridge to making it easier, your original tagline, that person who gets the one off may never get to 5 units, not because they weren't good at it, because they just didn't have any assistance and they couldn't handle the just day to day on their own.
Right.
I know I was telling you before from, landlording at 14 and 15, in 1985,
Yeah.
like if I had a system, boy, I would have been crushing it. I would have got so much money because my dad would give me half of all the collections that I would get. But if I could have set up all those systems, like I was writing like programs for checks on Texas Instruments computers, then I would have
Yeah.
been crushing it if there were things
Right.
available. But I can really see that the ability to scale can be dependent on the ability to find technology to help you be more efficient, because a lot of first time landlords, of course, are still running a 9 to 5 because you're not,
Right.
you're not financially free at, a rental that's making you $200 a month.
Yeah, and that's where, it's funny you mentioned that about like the system changing your perspective of like how well you can do. I was when I was listening to like your episode 350, you talked about this a little bit about how like the media paints this like picture, this
Oh,
clearly
it's the
incorrect
worst.
picture of like,
Yeah.
as you referred to it, in like the slumlord of landlords, that's clearly not the truth. And I felt this same way, when I was starting RentRedi, where it felt like there was almost like, from a media perspective, this like demonizing of both sides. And
Yeah.
in reality, when I actually talked to people, right? Like I talked to thousands and thousands of landlords, and I can't tell you how wrong that is, of like how much
I
they
agree.
actually
Yeah.
genuinely care about their properties, about their tenants, and vice versa. How many tenants are like bright-eyed, excited to like live there and like genuinely appreciate the landlords that facilitate these great experiences. And more often than not, what I was finding was that you had like genuinely good people on both sides that wanted a great experience for each other. And the problem really was just that like they didn't have something in the middle that would actually facilitate a good relationship with them
Yeah.
and like make it easier for them to facilitate it. And I think, like you talked about it in there about some of the things you can do like in the physical world, like painting numbers on your parking spots.
Yeah.
But like equivalently, there were things that I looked at and were like, okay, what are the things that we can do on like through technology that can help set expectations for different people and avoid different arguments? And it was fun to see some of that start in an anecdotal sense, where a landlord would say to me like, hey, this professionalizes my relationship. If I'm house hacking and I'm living in one of the units and the tenant's living in the other one, I don't want to have an argument with them about like what the late fee is and when exactly it applies, or
Yeah.
when they're going to be reminded and I have to feel awkward texting them or something else. Like I can do it on the platform. The platform sets the late fee for me and it's based on what's in the lease. So it's all communicated, and like the rent reminders go out in a set schedule so that like they have time to pay and avoid that in the first place, or set up auto pay or other things. It's like you're creating this better experience for someone because you've created these rules and these systems that everybody understands. It's been communicated up front, and ultimately you get a much better experience for really both sides in the end.
makes a lot of sense to me. And I just, again, just use Airbnb as an example because when I'm a guest and I'm communicating with the host through the platform, I feel like there's a buffer and it's good for both of us. If I
Yeah.
was getting a direct text, I'd be like, yeah, it's a little bit much, like
Right.
if I'm an owner, I don't want like every Airbnb guest to have my cell phone number. Like they're going to be calling about everything. So
Right.
to be able to use a platform as a buffer without having to have property management is really the point. Like, and I mean, I was telling you again before, I coach all of my new landlords and experienced landlords that they can do it themselves until they get big enough where there's no reason to do it themselves. It's too many.
Yeah.
But because they are able to use technology in a way that makes it easier, it's very seamless if you do a good job. And I completely agree with you from how I grew up. My dad loved his tenants. I mean, he let them get away with everything, but he really cared about them.
Yeah.
And the majority of landlords really do. Some want to be a little bit more hands off, but I think that comes a lot from social media and thinking that, oh, landlording is going to be passive. And then you're like, oh, wait, it is you like, why can't they unclog the toilet? Well, because they can't get it done. And if they don't, it's going to spill out onto your floor and it's your house.
Right.
Is that something that you started to see over time? Like, wow, both sides have really good points on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that's where, like I've really fallen in love with building, and we've stayed so hyper focused on this segment. Like genuinely love building it for the independent landlord and their tenant because
Yeah.
I think there are so many things that like both sides have really good points about them, and if we can build something in the right way, where it's like you basically make everybody basically be right in this,
Yeah.
and have it work well for everyone. It's really fun to see the outcome. And so I think like the credit boosting was one that I think back to where, initially it was the tenants felt like, hey, give me a reason to pay rent on time. And the landlords felt like you signed a lease, you should pay me your rent on
Yeah.
time, right? Like
I'm in that court.
the contract, right? But it was one where over the years, we've been able to see tenants are actually 13% more likely to pay rent on time when you report their rent to credit bureaus. So, like, same tenant, same credit score, same availability of funds, same income. And we're able to increase their likelihood to pay you your rent on time, which means you're not missing mortgage payments, you're not hitting your bottom line from that, all because they have this kind of incentive. It feels less transactional, it feels more like something that's like actually helping them.
Yeah, a little
And
gamified. Like, hey,
right,
you
it's a
can get
little
it.
bit
I'm
gamified.
going to be up 5 points, especially for young
Right,
people though who are building credit.
right.
And that's really your first rental, as you were saying. We were kind of talking about how you were trying to get them. It's like a really awesome thing when you go to get your first rental. A lot of us, our parents, are helping us, but you have
Yeah,
to go and find it. To know though, then that you can build your credit by just making sure you get the payments in on time. I feel like that's definitely like a Gen Z thing. They're like, ooh,
yeah,
that's like a little tick mark. It's going to raise my little credit and Credit Karma, even though Credit Karma is not a real credit
right,
site. But
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
I like the ideas for sure. It's great.
yeah, and I think other things, are sometimes more like targeted at trying to help, one of the sides, and I view it as I'm a big fan of like game theory, and there's
Yeah,
these, kind of zero sum games where one person benefits and other person doesn't. I really try to focus on like the areas where we can either, have positive sum games, where it's either both sides are benefiting or one side's neutral and the other side's benefiting, and
right.
one of those like I think credit boosting is one of those where both sides are really benefiting. Another one that we found though is screening, especially in today's age where you have AI and the ability to like generate documents that are falsified and you end up renting to
I've
somebody that's
caught a
not
lot of people.
right,
Yeah,
right. People that aren't who you actually, intend to rent with. And when we looked at that, from talking to individuals that were living through it rather than trying to like, fill out a feature sheet, that was the thing that we heard was like, how do you figure out a way that they can't falsify the documents? And so that's what we ultimately achieved on the screening side. And the way we did it was by going directly to the source. And so when we do like asset and income verification, we're not asking them to take videos of or photos rather of pay stubs or bank statements or other things. We're actually connecting directly with the financial
link.
institution
Yeah,
and pulling that directly. So we can tell you what's in their savings, we can tell you what their income is, and it can't be doctored. And the same thing is true for like the credit, criminal, and eviction. They're not sending a PDF. If they have documents that you want sent, like we'll bundle those into a single
right.
PDF so you can flip through all of those. But at the same time, like we're eliminating some of that, ever changing risk of how people change, their actions based on the new tools that are available to them too. And so it's been it's one of those things that we knew anecdotally or qualitatively talking to people was solving a problem, but we've actually been able to see it on the platform too, where if someone's screened on our platform, we're getting them to pay on time 8% more often than somebody that's not. And it's because we're eliminating some of those, hairy situations where somebody may have sent in otherwise, a doctored document that doesn't look doctored. And then,
Yeah.
you're stuck in an eviction proceeding months later.
Yeah, we had someone who had a fake visa, fake HR letter. For years I've been telling people, don't call the number on the letter. Go
Right.
look it up
Look it up,
online.
call directly.
Same as with wire instructions. Like, come on, it's 2026. We know how to
Yep.
do this. But a lot of new landlords, they get really hopped up. They like to take the first renter. It's exciting,
Yeah.
but these tools I think help them, because if it helps them evaluate from a little bit of a 20,000-foot perspective, they're less likely to make that early mistake, even
Right.
if they're charged up and they really want to rent it. I mean, I just think there's a little bit of an overview there that can help them, again, not put their foot in all the holes that all of us have done over the years.
Right. You don't need to reinvent the wheel.
No,
There's
please
so
don't.
right. There's
Yeah.
so many people that have come before you and stepped in enough holes that they can look back and say, "Hey, look out for this one." And yeah, it's so true.
What?
You mentioned like that when sometimes people like jump at like meeting with the first person, it
Oh,
it
yeah.
made me think back to there was this one landlord I met that was out in New Jersey. I used to do the POANJ events years ago, and there's this landlord that scaled to 2,000 units, and I wanted to know, like, what did you do to scale to
That's
that
insane.
level?
Yeah.
And right, and like avoid issues along the way, because he really built it up over years and years. And one of the interesting things he talked about was he said, I meet with the best 5 tenants, not the first 5 tenants that apply. And I was like, how do you do that? And what he equated it to was his pre-qualification. He said basically, which connected with that other story I was hearing of the person that like met with some people that they wish they had, asked for some information up front. But he
Yeah.
basically, worked with us, said, hey, I'll happily give you like the pre-qualification questions I use. Like, I'm happy to have it help somebody else. But it helped screen out something that you otherwise would end up doing once you've shown the unit, they've submitted their full application and screening and everything. But like now you've taken time, your broker's
Yeah.
taken time, your tenants spent money and time. And so if you ask for like that quick 10 questions, okay, they have a pet. I don't accept pets in this unit. Or maybe pets are fine and their self-reported credit income is great. And we're gonna run the full credit and income later. So like they're disincentivized from lying about that
Right.
up front. But at least up front if they kind of fit your rough criteria on that. And so it's been a point, to your point of like, don't step in the holes of the people before you, that we've created a lot of these smart defaults that are based on these conversations we have with other people and understanding what problems or issues they've gone through and how they've solved them. And then saying, okay, well, when you start setting up, we're just going to set it that way and we'll show
Yeah.
it to you and you can change it if you want to change it, but you don't have to change it. And there's so many things that I think people almost expect you have to go through the setup of, that in reality, I think there's about 10% of it you actually have to do.
Yeah.
Like 90% of it is you can build off the smart defaults of people being, coming before you.
Right. And then make small adjustments along the way,
Right.
just like you did with the whole company. I
Right.
think that by trying to find the win-wins between them is only going to help, make a better relationship. And as I've always said, like, it really is about the relationship. For people who think they're going to be a landlord and like have nothing to do with the tenants and also not have property management, it's just silly. I like the
Yeah.
buffer in the middle, but like someone has to come do the
Right.
repairs. Someone, if they're not paying, has to have that conversation at some point, even if they keep ignoring the technology that comes
Right.
in, and one of my favorite property managers, Jen Rulins, she's been on the show a couple of times. She always says she's really good at having the uncomfortable conversations. So it's like, it's good that they have the bridge, but I'm sure you get it at some point that the landlords like have to, okay, they're not responding to all of my, you're late on the payments, I'm going to have
Right.
to knock on the door at some point. So there becomes the
Right.
humanization
It
outside
does.
of the tech as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think for the earlier on investors, I take a lot of pride in. I mentioned the how like I was doing our support for years and years, and I think that really has stayed a really core part of how we do everything we do. To the point that people called us crazy when we said we were going to do 24/7 chat. We're going to do for every single landlord and every single tenant on the platform, no matter like how much they were using it. People are like, you're going to drown yourself. Like there's no way you can actually support people at scale. And and we have. And I think like a big part of the way that we've done it has been by saying like, I understand that, like, to an extent, some people are going to have questions, especially when you're
Yeah.
starting out or like you're having that first uncomfortable conversation. But in a lot of cases, if we've gone through that, like helping a landlord get through that first uncomfortable conversation or figuring something out before, it makes it a lot easier to have it the second time or even build
Yeah.
something into the platform to address that. And so
Right.
I take a lot of pride in like, I think there's two parts of like helping people that is like help the person that's in front of you and then figure out how can no one have to ask that same question ever again. And I
Yeah.
think that's where there's a lot of fun, like building a platform that, you know, the next person that comes in goes, oh, that's intuitive, or like it told me how to handle
Right.
this uncomfortable situation. How did they think of that? And it's like, we didn't actually think of that. Like Jonathan,
Somebody-
before you had to
Yeah.
live through it, and then we had to build it to solve Jonathan's problem.
Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Ryan Barone. And if you want to get a code, you can get one. You can get started for just $99 courtesy of this podcast. It's your first year for 30% off if you want to be a smart landlord. Go to rentredi.com. I'm going to give you some more, but that's rentredi.com/L/Zen. rentredi.com/L/Zen. That's where you can get your code. Let's get back to the show.
I always tell all of my real estate agents, like when I was getting started as an agent like 13 years ago, anytime someone would ask me a question, I was like, oh, someone's going to ask that again. I'll just make a video. And then I
Yep.
would just send people the videos and everyone's like, how do you save so much time? I'm like, well, I already recorded it.
Right.
It's going to be at least in the ballpark. And then do you have any question? It's the same with what you're doing with technology. It's like, okay,
Right.
well, now we can implement this or have frequently asked questions with a very detailed answer. And then someone comes up with an extra point. You're like, oh, add that. It must have really helped though for you to have that CTO background, because in the beginning you were probably, oh, that's a good point. And like you're saying, overnight now it's implemented.
Right. Yeah, it definitely does. I still say really close to our you know, engineering to this day. And I think it helps a lot that, you know, I still like in my heart, like remember all of the conversations and
Yeah.
why we've built what we've built and how you've done it differently. And I think, you know, at face value, you can look at so many different things and be like, oh, it's so simple until you get into like building it. And then you're like, oh, I have a dozen different ways I could actually create this thing. And it has a different experience for someone on the other side of the screen that's using it. And so it really has been helpful to like have the context of what we've built and why we've built it and how it interconnects with other parts. And it's been fun to see, you know, things that started disconnected on the platform, like maintenance and chat that were supposed to be solving completely different problems, eventually came together where, you know, on a maintenance issue, that initial point of like just trying to solve the leaking sink. And then the chat side, which was trying to solve the problem with someone that was giving out their phone number and it's like, hey, I'm not really comfortable giving out my phone number. Or this couple that I met at one point that's like, my wife mainly manages the units and I don't really love that. Like, she doesn't really love that she has to give out her phone number to all of
Right.
our tenants. And it feels a little uncomfortable for this. And
It
it would be
is.
great if they could do it through the platform. And so that kind of solved that purpose of giving them the text-like communication channel. We have native apps, we have push notifications. It basically operates the same as WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And so they're able to text like they normally would, but it also means that if you want to chat with the other partner that owns it, or you want to chat with somebody else that you add as a teammate or something, that doesn't become this issue where you like lost the context of this whole thread. And then eventually we've been able to piece those things together where it's like, I have this maintenance issue that's connected to this chat. And now I have the context of what the issue looked like before and after and the invoicing, and that rolls into my P&L. So I can
Yeah.
see when I do my Schedule E at the end of the year, that's automatically categorized for me. And all of a sudden it's like my taxes that I was stressed about is easy because I let my tenants submit my maintenance through a platform. Like it really connects through in ways you wouldn't imagine until you get to live through it.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to something about the vetting of tenants and landlord standards, because it, it goes both ways, but like I feel like tenants sometimes get mad if, you know, they have a low credit and they want to have that conversation, but it's
Yeah.
fair for landlords because they don't, I don't want to hear those stories because I'll probably feel bad. So I
Yeah.
want to set the standards. Some of my landlords set standards, some not, but they have to be more careful because I feel like some rules went way too crazy. I remember seeing something and it was like, you can't reject someone with a bad credit score. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, like you're telling me I have to take a 500 credit score. Of course, there's any other reason you can come up with as well, but there is a fair amount of discrimination that, of course, goes on in the world and in landlording, but it's
Yeah.
still a very small percentage. So it does make it harder for people. That's why I think having those standards in place for a landlord is good. So you don't
Right.
waste everybody's time, right? You were talking
Right.
about that a little bit before.
Yeah, and you can record it. I think like even the simplest things of like keeping notes on like what decisions you make for different people is so critically important when you get to that point of, if something is a dispute of discrimination or not, and
Yeah.
you have notes on how you've historically made decisions on tenants and why you decided, okay, I'm going to ask for additional documentation from this person, or I'm going to reject this application, or I'm going to accept this application. It really helps. Or supporting evidence. Like
Yeah.
TransUnion for years looked at it wasn't just a accept or reject, but this conditional accept, this middle area when you looked at a renter score or a credit score to understand that maybe this person's a 600, and as I know in one of yours you were like, hey, I'd love to rent 700 pluses, but
Yeah.
sometimes
Good
600's
luck.
got to be the cutoff, right?
Yeah.
There might be some times where you say, this person has a good amount in savings, or they're making more income now than they were making during that period that they were,
Right.
going through job loss, and they missed some payments on their credit, and that impacted their credit. And I can see that in there. And so having that supporting evidence of, okay, what, they have this buffer of savings, like they're doing well, they're not in that same position, lets you actually maybe accept some tenants you otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah.
That ultimately might be great tenants in your unit, or
I
vice
agree.
versa, if they're not a good fit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the greatest things about being a landlord is being able to give someone an opportunity who maybe wouldn't pass the sniff test. That's why it's good to
Yeah.
have the technology and also to be able to reach into the technology and say, like, maybe there's a story here. Look, and
Right.
sometimes that story's fake. Like
Yep.
people have gotten faked out, but
Oh yeah.
sometimes you really just sometimes people have a real story that you can verify. And it's like, you know what? That makes sense. A lot of times people get divorced and then their payments go up, so their credit goes down. Totally understandable story.
Right.
And the good agents, if they have an agent on the rental side, are helping them present the documents in a right way, include a letter just to
Right.
explain it.
Right.
Things happen in people's lives, especially now with jobs and AI. People are going to lose jobs. They're going to have to figure it out. And you want to be able to provide rent. Of course, though, from the landlord's perspective, you'd like to know that they're going to pay. And that's why cosigners are a big deal, and they're great for college students, and they're great for people who've had trouble or went through a bankruptcy or something. Cosigner solves the problem.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, what are some of the biggest gripes that tenants had in the beginning? I know you built it originally for tenants and then we're like,
Yeah.
ooh, landlords need help, they're a disaster. We've talked about landlord issues, but what were the issues for tenants? I know it was like trying to get
Yeah.
what a landlord wants, but that's why it
Right.
must help to be on the platform, because then you kind of at least know, well, these are the things that I need to get together. Because if you haven't
Right.
talked to an agent, you're just like, can I just show up and rent? You
Yeah.
know?
I think it's a great question. I think there's something fundamentally different about being successful as an independent landlord than there is for even a professional property manager that's managing, thousands of units. And I think one of the biggest things that I've seen talking to landlords and talking to tenants both is how much influence a tenant enjoying a platform has on a landlord being able to use that platform. Like if you
Mm,
have two tenants and they hate paying the way that you want to pay, whether
yeah.
that's cash or it's checks or it's some platform or it's
Yeah.
Venmo or Zelle, if they don't like paying that way, it puts a lot of pressure and a lot of headache in your life to run around collecting it through different means and trying to figure out who's paid and who hasn't, and have I missed a payment, and did I apply the late fee or remind this person or whatever else. And vice versa, if you're this very, very large property manager, there's a bit more buffer where it's like, well, it's too bad that this one or two people don't like the way that or this platform that I'm using. It's great for me as a property manager.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of the reasons I actually don't like property management software as a term for like what we do for people, because I really view it as
I
like
agree.
this two-sided thing where it has to be great for the independent landlord and for the tenant. And if your tenant loves it, it will make your life so much better as a landlord.
Yeah.
And so that's where we have, taken a lot of pride in building native iOS and Android apps for people. Like tenants just enjoy using apps more. It's more intuitive.
Much
They get the
easier.
push notifications. Your messages with them or notifications about different things are not intertwined with every other, spam message that
Right.
somebody sent them over email. It has its own dedicated place. And so it makes it a lot easier to not miss the most important things in your life, like your rent or your leaking sink or
Yeah.
did your roommate pay rent. And so we built a lot of things into the platform that honestly made tenants happier too. I remember a lot of the older property management platforms, and I actually had to use one of them for years where it's like, I just great roommate. I love my roommate, but like I never knew if he paid rent on time because like I
Yeah.
would pay rent and it only updated for us once a month. So I never knew if he had paid or if I
Yeah,
had.
you're
And
like,
like
I
same
hope
thing's
we're
true
not
with like
getting kicked out. Yeah.
right with cash and checks where like you're paying through a system or Venmo or Zelle and you're like, hey, John, did you pay? Did you not pay? Oh yeah, I paid. And then you find out a week later, like the landlord message is upset that like that your roommate didn't actually pay your half. So being able to not only pay rent, your portion of rent as a tenant, but
Yeah.
also being able to set up auto pay for that has been really big on the platform and set it up even on different schedules. So like I get paid, on the 26th of the month, I might want to just pay you on the 26th of the month before I go spend some of that money. And then, I'm in a bad place because I went out to dinner too many times before the
Yeah.
first rolled around. And vice versa, my roommate might get paid on the 20th or the 29th or something. And they might want to pay on a different day. And so, as long as we're setting up our auto pay to pay by the day it's due, then we have some flexibility there to do what's best for us to ensure that we actually are paying our rent on time.
Are tenants able to set up pull it like weekly so that it adds up to the
Yeah,
month?
you
That's
can.
that's how I made my money when I was a kid.
Yep.
I talked to them and I figured they were like, I said if I was 16, I had my driver's license. I'm like, if I come by
Yeah.
weekly, will you give me some? And they're like, yeah. And we figured out that they weren't frivolous. It's
Yep.
just like their kid would need something where their kid wants something.
Right.
So they would
It's
just pay
budgeting.
weekly, much easier.
Right, right. Yeah, we do, and, to your point, it wasn't the first way we did it, right? Like, first
Yeah,
came payments, and then came auto pay, and then came auto pay your portion, and then on different days, and then kind of this, like, stacked auto pay where you could pay, on a weekly basis or on
that's
certain
smart.
days to do multiple different ones, and some of it came out of, we've really built this for, like, independent residential landlords that are doing single-family rentals
Yeah,
or multifamily rentals, but there's been some unusual use cases in the way that we've made this flexible enough for people that, I've seen some like hair salons which was one of them that asked for this, where even my co-founder was going to get his hair cut the other day and he was wearing
yeah.
his RentRedi shirt. And the guy was like, hey, RentRedi, I know RentRedi. He's like, no way, you own
Oh, that's
rentals? And
awesome.
he's like, no, I own this salon and I rent the chairs out here as
Oh,
units. The chair you're sitting in right
that
now
actually
is the
makes a
unit.
lot of sense because
Right.
they
And
get
he's
paid in cash. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down. Hot week, bad week. Yeah.
right. And you can imagine for them, like paying on a weekly schedule is
Mm,
far easier than paying on a monthly schedule. And the same thing is true for, a lot of different cases, like you were saying, even in like single family or multifamily rentals. But for them, he's like, they like submit maintenance through the app if something breaks in the hair salon and they pay their chairs on a weekly basis throughout the app. And they have that kind of flexibility to do it. So it's been kind of fun to see some of even the not explicit cases that we've built the
yeah.
platform for that like technically you can rent a lot of things as a unit, if you will.
That's kind of a genius play by them. I feel like people
Yeah.
are going to listen to this and be like, yeah, that can work. Cause there's a lot of, I would not really co-working space, but like a lot of times psychiatrists will share space, same office
Right.
space or swap out during the days. There's a lot of use cases for that, which I
Yeah,
think
we've
is
seen
great.
it even
Again,
with
it's the
parking
buffer.
places.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, like you said, like psychiatrists, other places. We've seen it even with parking spots where people have said, like, I own a lot and I rent these spots out on a monthly or weekly basis, and I'm putting the spot as basically a unit, and I rent that out. And it's been so interesting to see like what someone dreams as their thing they can rent.
That is interesting. So a long time ago, I had the CEO of neighbor.com and that's like, it's storage, but you can like
Yeah.
rent out your like
Right. Right.
underneath your stairs or anything.
Mhm.
Similar thing. It's like, it was because people were like, well, I want to rent this shed in my backyard. They're like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good idea. Let's go
Right.
with that. I mean, that it's really, I like the way that you think because you're creating a platform that is ever developing instead of creating a static platform, which I know exists in property management software, which I
Right.
don't think yours is. I don't,
Right.
because I think property management software is for property managers. That's how I
Right.
think about this, like
I'm with
landlord
you.
software. But like,
Exactly.
if you continue to iterate, you'll never stop getting better and the people won't leave, which is
Right.
how a company really grows, instead of making them use your antiquated system, that gets old pretty quickly.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think that's the dream, is like you build enough for enough use cases that people start to teach you the use cases your platform can be used for.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but you have to be receptive and
Right.
open to it, to say like, "Oh, we want to be kind of a learning machine,"
Yeah.
because that's just going to make people, like you said, it's going to make it easier for the landlord and the tenant if they appreciate the platform and the platform is adapting to them as they
Yeah.
go and adding, new bells and whistles that help them be more efficient.
Yeah, it honestly makes me think of, I was saying I co-founded the company with my dad, and I remember
Yeah.
early on someone was asking, is the software done? Is it done now? And he's like, no, it's never done. Like if
Yeah.
it's done, it'd get really boring really fast, right? Like if
Right.
there was nothing to do forever, like that would get really boring. So
No.
like there's
Yeah.
some joy in the fact that like there's this ever evolving, like there will always be new problems, new things that need to be solved for different things that, like the COVID case didn't really exist or have any interest to
Yeah.
anybody, a year or two before that, but then suddenly was the thing that everybody cared about. Or people living through different experiences. Like I remember this one landlord calling me from Texas one night and saying, "Hey, I'm going through an eviction proceeding. And I don't know if you know this, but whether you collect through like Venmo or Zelle, or you give them your bank account or RentRedi or anything else, if they pay even $1, it resets the eviction clock for me. And so I need to be able to block partial payments, because if they
Interesting.
pay me $1, I'm basically accepting a partial payment, whether they wired it to me because they knew my banking information, or I accepted a Zelle payment or Venmo or anything else." And so I was like, okay, this was one of those where I was like, give me the night and I'll
Yeah.
give it
Yeah.
to you tomorrow. And whatever you have it, the next morning, they had the ability to block payments on a tenant by tenant basis, so that they could say, okay, I either want the full payment or nothing, so they could
Right.
block partial, or to say, I don't want to allow payments at all. Like I want to wait,
Yeah.
get a money
Going
order,
with it.
like in person, going through this, depending on what kind of situation they were in.
I mean, a couple professional tenants out there just had a light bulb go off over their head, but
Probably true, probably true.
that's just part of it. What do
Yeah.
you think has evolved in the last couple of years, just in terms of landlord tenant relationships, that you've helped bridge with the software? I know we talked about it a lot, but I really see it as making something easier that is still hard. It's just
Yes.
uncomfortable. We have a
Yeah.
housing shortage. Renting is hard, especially if you don't have great credit, or you don't have time. You have like a week to get a rental. It's
Yep.
still hard. I
Yeah.
have a lot of landlord clients, so we list a lot of rentals. I do a lot of the intake, and I get them to my agents when they're ready to show. But it's still a hard process. It really
It
is.
is. Yeah, it is. I think there's kind of two directions I go in my mind. There's the make it easier for the landlord and the tenant, and then like um I think how do you well, okay, I'll get to it in a second. But
Yeah.
the first part that I'm thinking about is really like with a landlord and a tenant, there's certain things we can do that make things easier for them, like these automatic rent reminders that we know based on what people have done previously you should do. Or, for example, we were talking about applications earlier. There's
Yeah.
different realtor associations that have created templates like California and Arizona that say these are the questions you should ask, that will make sure you have a better experience and you're not discriminating and all
Yeah.
these other things that create headaches for you. And we just built them into the platform. So you just use the California template, use the Arizona template. You don't have to go look it up or set it all up or configure it all yourself. It's just kind of there for you. And I think there's kind of that ever evolving aspect of letting them communicate through the platform, building those other things. But the other part that I think about is when you think about both the affordability side, and this is kind of the second way I think
Yeah.
about it, rentals being affordable, more of an affordability crisis for tenants these days, and also more pressure on investors to still be able to be profitable in their units.
Oh yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's been a huge topic, especially over the last year, of how do I be more profitable in my unit? And I think the default that people think back to is, well, I'll increase rent, right? Like that. And that is
Right.
one of those
As
where,
if that's easy. I'll just go 300 above market rent. That'll
right,
work.
right. And I think that is, I think one of those that when I think about today versus even 2 or 3 years ago, was so much less of a conversation, because people were, I think, in many ways, keep catching up to market rates coming
Mhm.
out of COVID and even leading up into it. Yeah, you had the dip in the middle, but I think coming out, there was a bit of a recovery period. And we're kind of on the other end of that now, where a lot of places are kind of at market rate. You can't just increase it, but that's the thing that people think too of, how do I improve my cash flow or
Yeah.
my profitability on this unit? And I think there's so many ways, and this is where we've spent a lot of our time, to actually improve your cash flow, improve your profitability without increasing rent. And some of that is through measures that actually reduce your costs. And so some of them are like the management fee side of like, you're going to pay 10% to a property manager, or you're going to pay 39 cents a day on
Right.
RentRedi. And it's
Yeah.
like, you've saved a lot of money there. But I think there's parts beyond that that we've started to address with people. Like, we're working on this that'll be out pretty soon to people. And if anybody's listening that wants it, we'll make sure we give it to your audience first so they can
Awesome.
just message our chat and ask. But
Yeah.
we're creating these performance dashboards that identify things like where they can actually appeal against their taxes and lower their tax rates. So that's actually hitting their bottom line. They're improving their cash on cash return or their net operating income, simply by reducing the costs that they would have. Or, hey, we notice you keep having this fridge break in this unit. That it maybe made sense to fix it once, and it maybe even made sense to fix it twice, but there's an underlying issue here
Yeah.
where you could actually reduce your long-term costs by replacing that fridge or
Could have
doing a
had a
cost.
new fridge already.
Right, exactly. Or cost segregation studies where you're being able to,
Huge. Yeah.
deduct or deduct from those properties, or some of what we already have in the platform where we automatically categorize your expenses. We connect to your bank account. We'll categorize it to the Schedule E category so that you're getting like that maximum tax deduction at end of year, mileage tracking on the platform. So you're getting that tax deduction on
Yeah.
every time you're driving to and from a property, which a lot of people, I think, even 2 or 3 years ago weren't thinking about, and has become a really hot topic of being able to do that mileage tracking and us keeping track of every time the IRS changes that amount,
Yeah.
that will handle that for you in the platform. But it's become this ever increasing way of how we ultimately make you more successful, actually like more profitable as a landlord, without going to the seemingly surface level
Yeah.
easy way
Yeah.
of like, oh, you'll change rent. And so it's been a lot of joy, because ultimately those are all things that make no negative impact on the tenant. They're just as happy in the unit, and many times they're actually happier because you have less pressure. I've even seen some people on the platform that say like, hey, I have such a great tenant here, I'm going slightly under market rent, so I keep
Yeah.
this one and I never have the vacancy cost of them leaving.
Exactly.
And I can do that because on the other side, I'm reducing all of these other costs that I'm honestly more profitable than the guy down the street that is 200 above market rent, because they have all these other costs that they've incurred that are hitting their bottom line.
Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes landlords make is trying to go up 100 on the best tenant that you've ever had.
Yes.
When I'm looking at multifamilies with clients, whether they're going to house hack or they're trying to buy, and just when we go in and we see the tenants, I always talk to them and I'm like, do you see how clean this place is? It's like, you keep this tenant. You use a strategy where you're like, this is market rent, we'll give it to you for 100 below. And then they're like, oh, wow, they proved it and they're doing a favor because, again, like you were saying, you're not going to have the turnover cost. Someone's like, oh, well, that unit's not renovated. And it's like, well, that person's been there 11 years. You don't need to rent. They don't care.
Right.
You're going to fix things and stuff may come due and maybe do them a couple favors, but they really like it that way. That's the way it is. So now you don't have the renovation costs on a unit because you're keeping tenants. But yeah, I think it's a great idea what you're saying, as you're giving owners other tools so they can avoid that. Because yeah, your new landlord may say, they get a vacant unit and they just go too high, or they're trying to, get rid of a good tenant, which is crazy. There's nothing better
Yeah.
than a good, respectful tenant who keeps a clean place and calls you when something's wrong.
Yeah, it's so true. At this point, there's so many people on the RentRedi team that like actually own rentals and
Yeah.
manage their own rentals on the
Yeah.
platform. That you saying that reminds me of like our VP of growth that runs all the marketing side. Like she has one of her rentals she was talking about recently that she has this great tenant in there, and like they actually were like painting the door of
Yeah.
like her, like they're staying, but they were just like happy with it. And they're like, hey, do you mind if we like paint the door? And she was like, yeah, in fact, like I get discounts on it through the platform. I'll drop the paint off. Like if you want to paint it, that'd be great. And
But
they
that
like actually did it because, to your point, like they feel like it's their home too. They appreciate the environment she's created.
That's a great point because I think landlords get bent out of shape. I mean, I used to just for years spend so much time in the Bigger Pockets forums and I would read these like insane things from landlords. They'd be like, uh, my tenant, they got in a relationship and now the person's going to move in, and I want to up the rent. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's the same place. Like
Right.
what? Maybe when their lease is up, but like what, like you don't think that people who are single are going to eventually, most people want to get into a relationship. It might
Right.
help to have two
One of them
people
might be
there.
handy.
Right, exactly. Like it might
Yeah.
actually help. Now you have two people
Right.
watching over the place and
Exactly.
looking for things that are wrong. Or like you're saying, they say, oh, they want to paint, I'm going to charge them a paint back fee of 1,000. What if they're really good and it makes it look good? And then you just keep it,
Yeah.
instead of your dumb white walls or your cream ochre, now they painted a cool blue accent wall and you're like,
Right.
oh, I mean, it could go awry. I
Yes,
mean,
it could go
yeah,
awry.
you could go hot
Maybe you
pink.
could clear the color first or something and do a little cost or a little risk mitigation, but yeah, I think more often than not, there's a lot of times that if done artfully, you can actually, make it where they're actually happy to like, it becomes a competitive advantage for your unit. It's like,
Yeah,
well, now this unit's, like, exactly the way I've wanted it to be, so even if the one down the street's, like, a little less, that I really wanna go there and, like, repaint all this stuff and set
right,
everything up, like, I like being here. I've been here before my partner, and now they like being here. And
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So the platform is designed for independent landlords, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
how does it benefit tenants now though? Like if can a tenant go get themselves kind of like pre-screened and then send that was your original intent, I know, and then send it over to a landlord, not even knowing like if they use RentRedi or not.
Yeah. So today, tenants can find like any of our listings out on the popular listing platforms. We syndicate out to like Zillow and Realtor.com, Trulia Hotpads, even RentRedi sites. So if they find one of the RentRedi listings on one of those sites, then they can basically pre-qualify through there. We don't today at least do more of that. I think what you're thinking about maybe a little more of like the matchmaking.
Right, right.
Maybe it's an
Yeah.
idea for the future. But today primarily it's through they're finding your listings kind of in the places they're already looking for them. Um, and then
But
we'll
say
try to help highlight, a lot of things for you in a way that makes you stand out differently for them. Like, one of those is with the listing descriptions. We've seen a lot of listing descriptions, as you can imagine, over the years. And so we've been able to train our own models on what's a good way to
yeah.
write a listing description. And so if you come into our platform and you check off the different amenities you have or other things, or even if you don't check them off, you can generate the description on it. Like you can just click a button, we'll actually generate a description for you. And if you decide you want to actually type a little bit or add some other amenities, we'll take all of that into account. And it's been really cool to see where, knowing what's worked well for landlords or what hasn't worked well for them, what other things are in your area that you maybe even undervalue, like how close
Yeah.
you are to like a park in your area or the Costco or something else that's around you.
Yeah, like
Um,
you can't do a Craigslist description. That doesn't work anymore. People want a little more
exactly.
story.
Yeah. So we've tried to make it enticing to stand out to them, but I think one of the biggest ones is honestly just once the tenants there, them like loving the platform to the point that it becomes again one of those competitive advantages where we've seen some tenants where like they move to another landlord and they actually bring the new landlord on because they're like, I don't want to go back to
Yeah.
like Venmoing people after I've been
Oh,
paying through
it's
this
the worst.
platform.
Yeah. And it's not good for taxes that way
Yes.
at all.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, man. So I'm just assuming the best place to go if people want to check out RentRedi is rentredi.com. And that's RENTREDI.com.
Yes, it is. We're a startup still, got to spell things wrong. So REDI.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. It says right here, welcome to the home of smart landlords, collect
Yeah.
rent, handle repairs, and keep tenants happy all in one simple platform. I really appreciate your time and I like how you've set it up and how you've built it. I can tell that it's built with the intent of making people happy and making it easier for them. So yeah, it's been a great show. Really appreciate you swinging by.
I appreciate you having me, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Excited to
thanks
be
so
here.
much. All right,
Thank
that
you.
was Ryan Barone. He's the CEO of RentRedi. Again, you can go to RentRedi, RENTREDI.com to find out more. I'm Jonathan Greene. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on episode 361 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And it's Aaron Marsh, the founder and president of Marsh Lending. Now we're talking diverse range of unique mortgage solutions
DSCR for investment properties, no income or employment verification loans, bank statement loans, portfolio loans, 1031, and more. We're talking about how to get the job done when you want to get your next investment. Next episode with Aaron.